My name is Lizzie Shake-Snyder, and I am the Professional Development Manager with the Louisiana Legislative Auditor's Office. It's my pleasure to be here today and tomorrow, and it's also my pleasure to introduce our next presenter, Ms. Jenifer Schaye. Jenifer Schaye is the General Counsel for the Louisiana Legislative Auditor. She has practiced law continuously for the last 43 years in Texas and Louisiana. Jenifer has substantial experience in the governmental arena. In her capacity as General Counsel to the Legislative Auditor, Jenifer advises on public law issues and laws relating to fiscal matters, ethics issues, and all public laws which impact political subdivisions and the audits of political subdivisions on the local and state levels. In addition, Jenifer represents the Legislative Auditor and staff in those matters where they are called to testify and/or to produce records for further inquiry by state and federal courts. She also advises the Louisiana Legislative Audit Advisory Council on relevant audit issues. Please join in welcoming Ms. Jenifer Schaye.
Thank you. I heard that Lizzie said that her announcement, her introduction of me isn't online. So for all of the people that are online, I'm going to say, you remember me. I'm the voice on the other end of the phone. And I'll say that to all of you, that I know I've talked to many of you on the phone, and please come up and talk to me and say, hey, you remember? And I'll say no, and you'll say your name, and we'll renew our acquaintance. So it isn't that I don't want to talk to you. Before we start, I know you're all settled down, but I'm going to ask everyone online and in here to stand up. You mind? So, in standing up, I'm going to ask you to clap. Clap, come on. Real loud. People online too. Act like LSU just beat Alabama. That said, I wanted to, Mr. Wagsback left, and sit down, please. He's a new auditor, and I wanted to let him know I could get a standing ovation. Because even at my age, I still like to do what I do. So thank you very much. I want to say to you that it is just a pleasure for me to be involved in CLGE. I was saying this morning, and I'll get to the stuff, but I was saying this morning that we did this the first time in, I think, 2016. And our boss at that time was a man named Tom Cole, and he was sure that we would not make it from Baton Rouge to Lafayette in less than 3 hours because they were fixing, really seriously, fixing Interstate 12. So when we did that, we left at 4:45 in the morning for an 8 o'clock presentation. We get to this building in Lafayette. My watch thinks I fell when you clap. It's making a noise. And we get there, and we're in this small building, and the whole freaking building is full of firemen. And Tom turns to me and he said, what's going on? I said, I don't have a clue. Well, the firemen weren't there to protect us from fire. They wanted to buy fire trucks and build buildings. So they wanted to hear about the public bid law. So I know you're not here to buy fire trucks necessarily or build buildings, but my job then and now is to tell you somewhat about the public bid law. So before I do that, I tell you this. Here's what I always say at the beginning. Maybe it's dull, many of you have heard me before, but I'll say this. Call this number, 339-3871, 339-3871, area code 225. That's the legal division of the auditor's office. I will not get paid extra this Friday because you have a problem. I want to help you with the problem. And I have two very smart lawyers who work with me, Angela Heath and Patrick Virgadamo. And we make it our business to return phone calls and to give you our best advice. When I stepped out earlier, it was because we were trying to give advice to somebody. I admire what you do. I don't just say that, I mean it. I'm a native Louisianan who got educated someplace else, but got educated enough to come back home. So I'm very grateful to live here. I'm very impressed over my years of government service with the quality of people like yourselves. And so no question is wrong. No question is something you can't ask. You ask it. And that goes for today too. If there's something in that you want to ask here, raise your hand. If there's something you want to ask online, you'll fill it in as they tell you to. And Andre or my friend Marshall will tell me, hey, stop and answer this question. I also want to make sure that you know that for our excellent speakers that were before me, they also want to answer your question. So if you didn't get a chance to ask them a question during or at the break, then their information is on the last slide they had, and you can contact them. So that said, okay, before I turn on the slides, it strikes me, and I've been to more talks than I want to remember, that you remember the first thing in a talk, first few minutes, and then after that, you might, at this point, might be starting to think, what about lunch? What about, where's that bathroom? Do I have to go back this afternoon? How's the traffic on the basin going to be? Whatever. What I want to talk about now is imagine that you and I were sitting together either in my office or your office, preferably your office. I like your office. One time the gentleman back there in the green shirt, Mr. Green, invited me to his office in St. John Parish, and I liked it because they had better food than my office. So I just point that out to you. That we can sit down and we can talk. And I want to talk today. And there are a few things that if we were sitting down in your office and we were saying, hey, Jen, you want to talk about public bid law? I do. It's something that puts some people to sleep, but me it doesn't. You know why? Because it is your chance to show that you're a fiduciary with an open hand, a trustee of the people in your town and who populate your space in the world, to buy things, to use public funds in the most proper way fashion, that you can fashion. So I will say to you, what the first thing I'd say to you if we're getting ready to talk about the public bid law, and that is that the law is not a private thing. If you can remember that, you're 90% down the road in public bid. The law is not private. The law is public. The law is created so that we as a public, we as a community can share resources. So if somebody comes to you and acts like, we can do this, turn out the lights, it's just me and you, that's a sign. That's not okay. And that you remember that we're talking, that this desk we're sitting at, this computer, this paper, it's somebody else's money and it's somebody else's property. You say, well, okay, so what does all that add up to? It adds up to that in public bid, we are transparent and we are accountable. We are transparent, we are accountable. And that we have to follow certain procedures. Because what? I'm telling you, it's not private. If I had to write the public bid law, and I didn't, but if I was a legislator and I had to write the public bid law, I'd probably write it a little bit more direct. No, I'd probably write it a lot more direct. A lot more direct. But they wrote it that way. And so in writing it that way, it is what we call a prohibitory law. It is, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And you look at me, I'm a kind of a big picture person. Patrick Virgadamo in my office, he's kind of a guy who remembers every whip stitch and every detail, and that's a good thing. I'm kind of a big picture person. So I have to go look, how many times do I have to advertise? How long before I have to execute the contract? There is nothing wrong with that. But what I have to remember is that it's a prohibitory law, and I can't throw in my own version of the public bid law. I have been in court many times, and I've won some and I've lost a bunch. And any lawyer who tells you they hadn't practiced law real well. So one of the times that I won was because the judge gave me a chance to walk him through certain procedures. And he said to the other lawyer, and I say this in all humility because it taught me a lesson, he said, you told me what you think you want the law to be. Ms. Shea told me what the law is. That's the difference. That's the difference in public bid law. You have to follow what the law says. Now, we have put together frequently asked questions, the telephone calls to us, various advice to help you with that, because we need help with that. What I would say to you then is, in the whole issue of public bid, and this is hard, you cannot be spontaneous. Got it? You cannot be spontaneous. Now, I like being spontaneous. I love going out to dinner at a place I don't know. I love doing different things. But this ain't the place to do it. Public bid law means look at the stuff, plan. Because who's going to remember that you made a mistake? You know? The dude that lost, or the lady that lost, the lady that didn't get the bid, or the curmudgeon in the town who calls you on every whip stitch. You got them in your town. I know you do, because they call me. And they tell me you did it wrong. So what you want to do is you want to do it right. You don't want to be spontaneous. It's okay to slow it down. It is, in this public bid situation, it is not a sprint. It is a marathon. And that's not a cliche. It means I got a beginning, I got a middle, I got an end, and I got a contract that I'm executing, and I'm watching every deliverable in that contract. Now, I'm doing it for two groups, two different concepts, I should say. One is I'm doing public bid for materials and supplies, which isn't defined in the law, but just think of it like this. If you can move that bottle, it's a material. If you can pick up that piece of paper, it's a material. Materials and supplies are what we think of as movables in common English. What's public works? It's a renovation or a construction. It is a renovation or a construction of a public entity. You say, whoa, now wait, they're going to paint the building. It could be that that's a public work. If they're going to paint the whole building, or if they're only going to paint that podium, that might be maintenance. Well, so if it's maintenance, it is a professional service. Now, I have many people who will call, and I do it myself. He'll say, if it's a professional service, does it have to be bid? Does it? No. But you know what? We live under the Louisiana Constitution, which says, Article 7, Section 14, that you got to do it reasonably. So if you have to do it reasonably, then you might not have to do it with bidding, you know, advertising 3 times and all of those steps, but you doggone have to do it where it's a reasonable purchase. It's a reasonable public consulting contract. Cutting the grass, is that maintenance? Could be. Or it could be a public work, depending on what you're doing, but generally it's maintenance. So if the guy wants to charge you, one guy wants to charge you $1,000 a plot, and another guy wants to charge you $200, you're going to do some due diligence, right, to figure out what's right. So I just offer that to you. And then we're going to talk somewhat here about emergencies. And what I get the most excuse for not doing the public bid is someone will say, this is an emergency, Jenifer. Do you not understand emergencies? I understand emergencies. I mean, I do. But there's a difference between an emergency and I just put it off. Right? I just put it off. Sometimes when it gets to be the holidays, I say to myself, I got an emergency. I don't have my Christmas tree up. That's not an emergency, right? That's me delaying things. That's different. And there are two different kinds of emergencies. There's an emergency that the light out here for us to turn in the light center doesn't work, and we gotta get it fixed, and we get it fixed, and then the parish council declares 10 days later that was an emergency. Or, God forbid, we have a hurricane or some other horrible flood or storm and water's coming in. That's an extreme emergency. And no one is waiting for the council to meet when there is an extreme emergency, right? Remember that. But what I tell people all the time, when there is an extreme emergency, is that eventually the sun's going to shine. Eventually that's going to happen. Thank God the good Lord figured that one out for us. And when that happens, you want to go right down, why did you consider it emergency? Document it. So what Diane and Tiffany were talking about, documentation. What do I say? I didn't get a bid for the roof. I'll say, was the wind coming in? Yeah, I had to get that blue tarp on it. True conversation from someone in Terrebonne Parish when Ida hit. I said, go get it. She said, but Jenifer, there's nobody in the whole area who can do it. I got to go to this guy in Texas, and I mean, I got to get it done. But I said, go get it. Document your file later. Cover that hospital roof. But it costs $350,000. I don't care. Go get it. Get it done. Now, if you're getting it from your daddy or your brother, I'm going to have another issue. But that's it, okay? So I want you now, I'm going to run through the slides. I know I have till 12 o'clock or so, but I got enough time that I've told you now. If you left now, I feel okay, because I've given you the framework. I've given you the framework that'll help you answer questions. Now I'm going to talk about one other framework piece. And I spent a lot of my life in the Catholic Church. I am a Catholic, but I was a Catholic nun for 23 years before I did this. And I was still a lawyer, but they sent me to law school. So I know something about church. I know something about going to church. And I know something about sitting in the last pew, where you keep your eyes down so that the priest or minister can't see you. I know that. Here's one where you get a chance to do that, no matter where you're sitting, in this auditorium or out there with our 800 other friends. That is that sometimes your boss, be it the parish president, be it the mayor, somebody is coming in there, and you and I have just had our conversation about public bid, and they're saying, I don't care what the auditor said. I want that truck today. And I want you to buy it from that guy down the block. He's my campaign constituent, friend, buy it. And your stomach's turning. And you're going, oh, this is not good. Maybe I should get that McDonald's job. I don't know. Right? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to try to slow down that train. But if you can't slow down that train, I want you to document your file. Document your file so that you are covered, so that you have done everything you can do. That can happen in your office, that can happen at a public meeting, at an open meeting, that can happen between you and alder people, or you and whoever is your boss. But just document your file. The more we educate each other, the less that's going to happen. The less that's going to happen. Because Diane said it, we are friends. We are trying to educate each other. And I take the view that 99% of the people want to do the right thing. So if you take that view, you'll be okay, and you can sit in the last pew, but it'll be okay. Now, any questions so far? I can go too. We can go eat a longer lunch. No. We're going to go through some slides now that my assistant, who I think might be watching this, Pam Mixon, she helps me out. She makes the slides look nice and keep your attention. So, you see that guy? Oop, I'm made to go too fast. What's the common word there? Public. So, what's our conversation in your office? It's public money. It's public property. It's public time. It's public employees. It is different than what you would do in your house. I like little things to help me remember. So I'll say, always in public bid, you're going to try to be precise in your bid document. You're going to carefully advertise. You're going to carefully execute the contract and all the procedures that go with it. And you're going to carefully monitor. The one that I see so many people, it just goes by the way, is the monitoring of the deliverables, the monitoring of the contract. If you ordered 50 cases of paper and you only got 20, what would you do if it were your money? You'd get on the phone, wouldn't you? You'd say, I'm not going to pay for the 30 other cases. Remember, it's public. So what you're going to do is you're going to get on the phone and you're going to execute. You're going to execute a requirement that they produce that. Suppose you're in a public bid situation, and this has happened more frequently than not since the pandemic. And that is, we had a contract to build the building, but all of a sudden, steel costs more. What do I do? What do I do? He was the low bidder, but now he wants even more. What do I do? You do not have the legal authority to pay more. You can cancel the contract, find him in default, you can do that, but you do not have the legal authority to pay more. Does that make sense? That's a hard one. That's tough, because it's not that person's fault, but you don't have the legal authority. Let's talk about legal authority just for a moment. What is legal authority? It is that the council, or it is that the board determined they wanted this material purchased or this public property renovated or bought or built. And they set aside in the Local Government Budget Act procedure X dollars for that. That's the Appropriation Act. And that has to be done before you can even start this process. If you don't have the money set aside, you can't do it. If you come in if the bids come in higher than the money that was set aside, can't do it. So the appropriation has to be done by the legislative body. Then you only have that much funds to spend. Well, you say, it got better though, Jen, because the American Rescue Act gave us some more money. So they set aside $100,000 for this renovation. But with the ARP money, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow, I got some extra money. Can I spend it? No, because the bid was that, and that you have to stay with the bid. Okay? So try to, if we have to talk about that in private, we can. I told you, two different kinds of of contracts, public works, materials, and supplies. Services are still subject to the Constitution. Now, Mr. Wagersbach talked about his life story. One time in my life, besides being a Catholic nun, I also ran a water and sewer company. And don't ask me how that happened, but it happened. I was in better shape. I climbed up, looked at nasty water and all kind of stuff. So I know that services are important, how you run government, how you run sewer and water systems and so forth. They are subject to the Constitution. You still have to get the most reasonable price for that service. The Attorney General opinions say that if you want to use public bid for services, you say you're going to use public bid for services, then you have to do it. In other words, if you say you're going to do it, you can't change the rules midstream. Like if Alabama would try to change the goal line, we're not going to allow that. They're going to storm the field at Tiger Stadium, right? And I'm going to defend every kid that gets arrested. Constitution is that article. That's the article. My money versus public money. I do different than my money than I do with public money. And that can go either way. Sometimes I'm stricter with my money than with public money, or sometimes I'm looser with my money than public money. You know, I always, it's so funny that people will call and say, can we give out candy to the kids for Christmas? I say, yes. Really? I thought you would say no. I say, yeah, but let it come out of the mayor's campaign fund. He's not going to want to do that. Wow. Well, private money, you can spend it. Public money, I got more limitations on. The references that we look are in the public bid law. Very important to tell you. They have changed the limits. This session of the legislature changed the minimum limits. $60,000 and above must be bid. An amount exceeding $60,000 must be bid. An amount exceeding $250,000 for public works must be bid. So that's important. For the last few years, we've been going by the Consumer Price Index, and it's been changing every year. Now, they've said it, and in 2025, they're going to look at the Consumer Price Index again, they say. They may change again at that point, but that's where we are. So if you go to our FAQs, which are at the legislative auditor's site, FAQs on public bid, you'll see that we have all of these numbers changed, hopefully. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Okay, first question, is there a threshold dollar amount on a public works project that requires you to hire an engineer, or can you provide the scope of work in-house no matter the cost?
So the question for all the people outside, is there a threshold amount to hire an engineer, or can you do it in-house when you have a public works contract? That's a question. I say use your common sense. If you think the project, the answer is there is no threshold amount. But if you think the project is complicated, then you want to have the services of architects and engineers. That's important. So there's no threshold amount. If I'm going to paint the whole building, I mean, probably I don't need an engineer to tell me how to buy paint at Sherwin-Williams. But if I was going to take out some beams in this building and didn't want to get sued for people getting killed when it collapses, probably I'd want an engineer. Does that make sense? Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Materials and supplies, I've told you, are not defined, but movable property. Now, on movable property and on that threshold amount, or that minimum amount, rather, of $60,000, people will say, okay, I'm going to buy one piece of paper at a time, so I never have to bid anything. No, no. The Attorney General opinions say that what you do is you estimate how much of that material you need in a given year. So if you know that you always use 45 cases of paper clips, then maybe you're going to have to bid that. Or maybe if it's between 30 and 60,000, you're going to have to get 3 quotes. So under 30, you might want to just think about getting some information in your file that documents you had a reasonable expense. But you try to estimate it. Now, if it's an unusual thing that's happened, then you might not be able to estimate. But a lot of things you know how much you're going to spend in a given year. And that's how you determine whether you have to get, is it under the bid limit totally? Do you have to get 3 quotes? Or do you have to go out for full force bid? Make sense? That would be like somebody called me. I'll learn by example, so hope you don't mind. Somebody called, they were buying asphalt. They said, we can get some asphalt, but the guy wants to sell us just a little piece, costs whatever, I don't know much about asphalt, but $20,000. I said, but how much asphalt did you use last year in your roads? Lady said, close to $1 million. Close to $1 million. So what do you think? What do you think? It's got to bid, right? Got to bid. She has an estimate. She has to make sure. She said, oh gosh, I got to go back to the council, right? Because you got to get the monies appropriated. But if you did the budget right, you should have those monies in the budget so that you can do that. Does it make sense? Estimates are very important. You want to look at materials and supplies, how much, amount, advertisement, receiving and opening. I just want the thing about responsible bidder. Responsible bidder. Now, if Jenifer Schaye comes in and she wants to furnish paper to you, and you know that the way I get paper is from Amazon, you know that. So probably I can't satisfy your needs for paper. Then I'm not a real responsible bidder. What do? The law says you give that person who you think is not a responsible bidder due process. And the statute outlines what due process is. You notify them ahead of time that they can't participate in the bid process. You tell them why they can't participate, and you give them an administrative hearing. Now, if they come in and say, oh, you thought I couldn't do it? You thought I was doing it out of my house? Oh, no, I used to, but now I have an office, da-da. So what's going to happen there is you're going to probably change your mind. But if you find out that I was still doing it out of my house and I'm not a responsible bidder, you're going to document that I'm not a responsible bidder. Make sense? Any questions?
Is that for supplies total or just for paper and other things?
Paper and other things.
Okay.
Well, say you buy all your, you could say you want to buy all your supplies from one vendor. The question is the amount just for paper, or if I want to buy everything from one vendor, what do I do? Excuse me. If I'm buying everything from one vendor, I'm sorry, I don't have COVID, all right? I just have allergies. Maybe I'm allergic to y'all, I don't know. Not really. If I'm buying everything from one vendor, I'm going to bid that. I'm going to bid that. I think that's the conservative view, and I'm conservative. About stuff like that, I'm conservative. I do not want you to turn out, they always tease me in the office that I always used to say, I don't want you to be above the crease in the morning newspaper. Then nobody gets the freaking morning newspaper anymore, you know. So then I say, I don't want you to be on social media. So they'll say, Jenifer Schaye, she bought X and she didn't bid anything, and she ought to get removed. And that'll be on Facebook and neighborhood and all of that. So be conservative in your public bid situations. Yeah, question?
Okay, $60,000, is the $60,000 limit for a single vehicle purchase other than police, or 2 or more vehicles bought in one fund, $60,000 for the total vehicle purchases?
Okay. This is a question about purchase of vehicles and contrasting that with the police. The police statute is they have to bid if it's more than $40,000 for one vehicle, if they're buying one vehicle. If we're buying more than one vehicle, say you're a drainage district and you're going to buy the backhoe, the tractor, and a car, it's not $60,000 per vehicle. It is the whole transaction. Any questions on that? Yes, sir.
What if you had a bidder that you knew was not, or you had experience that they were not effective in construction, and they bid and they become the lowest bidder? How do you manage asking them to not be a part of it? Because you don't want to rehash that again.
Right. The question is for all the people online, if we're in the public works situation of construction and we have a bidder who we know is not a responsible bidder, is that right?
Well, they're still licensed.
Yeah, I know.
They're not moral.
But everybody in the whole area knows they're not moral, right?
Yes.
Okay, or at least that's the allegation. What I would try to do is figure out that when you're in the bid process, so that you can give that person due process and allow them to say, I am a responsive and responsible bidder, and go through the process. If you don't do that, you're going to be hard pressed to not give it to the low bidder. So it's very important to listen to the community. It's the marathon, not the sprint. Listen, listen, listen. And so you can have your due process hearing before you do your bid opening. That's critical. Good question. Okay.
Jenifer, I have one more.
All right.
Actually, I have 2 more.
All right.
The first one, is routine maintenance considered public work, such as a painting of a building, and does it have to be bid out?
Is routine maintenance considered a public work? Well, if it's routine maintenance, that's ordinary, what you do to keep up the buildings in South Louisiana. I think that's maintenance, and I don't think that's a public work. If routine maintenance is stretched to the point where you're tearing down sidewalks and putting up walls, I think that's a public work.
Okay, one more. You mentioned the appropriation of funds for specific bids, but I thought the public bid law required budgeted funds, not necessarily appropriated. Can you please discuss the difference?
Budgeted to me is the same as appropriated. Budgeted is the same as appropriated. That's why when people don't have a budget, and you know, people, we got curmudgeon here and mayor here, and they can't pass a budget. They have no appropriated funds. Once the budget is passed, then it has categories that say these monies are appropriated for this. Now, you might not say, you know, exactly that this is going to be for this wall construction, but you say it's for construction, so it's been appropriated and you have the money.
I just need some clarification. You said on a vehicle, if you're purchasing one vehicle, 40,000 or less?
40,000 if you're a police vehicle.
Okay.
If you're a regular, are you a police, just regular? 60,000.
Okay. And what happens if, I mean, don't we have state contract?
Oh, I'm going to talk about that, but let me talk about it right now. That's great. There's alternatives to the public bid. There's alternatives. Say the assessor's office wants to purchase a Suburban. If they can find that Suburban on the state contract list, State Office of State Procurement has already gone through the public bid process for you, and you can purchase it that way. There's also something that we call piggybacking. And if somebody else has purchased it within a year and you go through the certain process that's in the law on piggybacking, you can purchase it that way. Does that make sense? Okay? Keep going. Oh, got another. Good. This is great.
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question about public works. So if the bids go out, they all come back in over budget.
Yeah.
So your low bidder, the bid has not been awarded because they're all over budget. All of a sudden, the low bidder thinks that we can do what we call value engineering. Is that possible without them being?
Not in my opinion. Here's the question. You put everything out for bid, and you had your money appropriated, you knew what money you had, and everything comes out over your budgeted money, right? So all the bids come in, everybody they open the bids, and the guy who was the low bidder said, "Yeah, I can do it for that." Can they do it? And Mike said, my opinion, no. My opinion, you can use words like value, they use, not you. Value engineering, no. If you thought you could do it for that, then I'm going to start the budget process again and you bid that lower amount. Then you're going to win. They don't like to hear that. But that's the way, that's an important thing for you to do. To not manipulate for any person. Even if they sound like they're smart and they sound like they're your best friend, don't manipulate so that someone gets something.
But now, if it's, so we throw the bids out, we go back out for bid again, now everybody knows what that number is and what they.
Well, she's saying like if they go out for bid now, everybody knows what number. Well, they already knew what number you had as regards the money budgeted. So actually, you're better off because everybody's going to bid lower. Everybody wants the work. So it's not going to hurt you. What it's going to do, and I know it's not easy to say this, it's going to delay you. It will delay you, but it's worth the delay. No problem.
Can you accept the lower bid and do a change order to reduce the scope of the work to make it fit within your budget?
The question is, I'm not going to have to show these slides. I don't care. Y'all have them in the book. This is great. The question is, can you accept the lower bid? The lower bid, which was still not, it was still, they were trying to get it to the budgeted amount, and then just do a change order? Answer, no. The change order is to be used once the bid process has been completed and the contract's there. Here's what a real change order is. A change order is, I thought I was putting in this type of desk. This type of desk is no longer available. I have to put in Y type of desk. Am I still putting in a desk? Yes. Is that what you bid for? Yes. That's a change order. Now maybe the desk is going to cost more. Maybe the wall's going to cost more. But it's a change order within the scope of the contract. Within the scope of the contract. What I see a lot in our work is somebody will say, Jenifer, I finally found an honest contractor. Say, you're good. Because I've renovated my house and I had trouble with that concept. So what I say is, you want to give him other work, right? Yes. And he says he can do it, and we like him, and can he do it? Answer, no. You have to bid it. If he's that good, he can build that other building for you. Come in with the bid. But if that other building is not part of your initial construction, your initial contract, you can't do it. You have to be within the scope. And what the legislature has realized about that, because there have been so many people, good contractors, who have been ripped off by people that came in with a low bid, and then through change orders, the cost of the public work doubled, tripled, even quadrupled. The legislature says, and they're right, all change orders have to be in writing, and if the change order amounts to 10%, one change order amounts to 10% of the contract, the whole contract, it has to be recorded. If all the change orders in the aggregate amount to 20% of the whole contract, then they all have to be recorded. And if you haven't recorded the contract, record the contract. That's a mandate. That's what we call a shall in the law. And there are a lot of people who don't like that provision. But you know what? I think that's a great provision, because then it's not me and you on a handshake. It is a written change order that is publicly recorded, with the contract being publicly recorded. Make sense? Andre has a question.
Just as a clarification, if purchasing multiple vehicles for conversion to police vehicle is the $40,000 threshold for each vehicle, or the total amount within the fiscal year?
It is the total amount. Well, let me repeat the question. If you're purchasing multiple police vehicles, do you go $40,000 per vehicle? Right? Mm-hmm. Answer, y'all help me. No. You can't go $40,000 per vehicle, because what's that called? Splitting. You know you're going to purchase 100 vehicles. You have to bid those vehicles. I got that question. Actually, that question, I mean, I hope it wasn't from that person, but that question from a large sheriff's office in the state. And it was, I won't say who it called me, but the person said, Jenifer, they want me to purchase 20 different cars and use the $40,000. Can I do that? I said, not if you don't want to be in social media or in the newspaper tomorrow. He said, I'm not doing that. No. Okay, tell me what to do. Bid the vehicles. Bid all the vehicles you reasonably estimate that you're going to purchase, or buy them off a state contract. Now, what people have been telling us, and y'all may know it better than me, is because of the supply chain issues, state contract doesn't have that many vehicles on it. Is that right? None now. If you get on it right at the beginning of the fiscal year, you might get it. Why? I want to make sure you understand. Why is that? That you can purchase off a state contract? Well, it is because they have already gone through the bid process. It's not that they haven't been bid. They went through the bid process to get that done. Okay? I'm in. The question is, say you're in that 30 to 60, or you're under 250 in public works, and you try to get 3 quotes, but you can't get 3 quotes. Then what do? I say you show good faith. You document it, you show what you did. That's all you can do. One thing though, I want to make sure, another alternative that you know, it hasn't been used a whole lot, is that you have kind of, not for public works, but for materials and supplies, you can do now electronic bidding on your website. It's kind of like an eBay kind of auction thing. So you put out there what you want, and you allow people to bid on it. And there are rules in the statute that walk you through how to do that. But that's a good provision, because then you have a certain time period they're putting in their bids. It's kind of like when you go to a charity event and you do a silent auction. That's not a bad. Here's another alternative. And another alternative is request for proposals, RFP. You hear about that all the time, and I see some of y'all saying, oh, I know about that. That's especially important if you're doing electronic equipment, computers, cameras, radios, because most people don't know all the specificity that they need in those types of contracts. So what you would be doing is saying, I need this many cameras in the jail, it's got to cover this area. You know, you give a reasonable explanation. Well, in the request for proposal issue part, and you could do this for things that are under the bid limit also, request for proposal, you don't have to take the low bid. You take the one that fits you best, the one that's most favorable. Now, that said, you still can't buy a $500 hammer, okay? But it's better. And you say in your request for a proposal, what is your criteria? And once you say what your criteria is and how you're going to judge what comes in, you can't change it in the middle. So it still requires public money, public property, public trust, but it just gives you other alternatives. And we have, again, all of that described in our FAQs. Any other, oh, we got a question back there.
So on a construction project, if you bid an amount, I mean, you put out an amount in the budget and all of it comes back higher, and you have the possibility to secure additional funding, how do you handle that? And
you have the possibility to what?
Secure additional funding?
Yeah. If you have a construction project, it came back, everybody came back, you didn't have enough money because they all came back higher. Now you have additional funding, you have to rebid it. You have to rebid it. And that's happening all over because of the American Rescue Plan dollars. Happening everywhere. Happened with the CARES Act money.
So you just go back and you secure the additional funding for like the lowest bid, and then you put it back out there and hope that nobody goes over that, because
you go back and you do it as if you hadn't done it before. Put back out exactly what you want your project to be. You make sure you have your council or your legislative body has appropriated the additional money that goes with it, and you put it out for bid. You don't judge by the lowest bid, you just put it out for bid. You have more money. They know you have more money.
Yeah, it just worries me that it comes back the next time even higher, and then you need even more money.
Then you can't do it. If it comes back higher, you don't have the money, you can't do it. You still got to stay with the basic rules. Money has to be appropriated, and you have to get the low bid. Andre.
This, I think, goes along with that. With rising COVID and economic costs, most of our contractors are coming back in increasing supply costs due to this inflation. How are we supposed to handle this?
That's what I was talking about. Here's the contractors there. They're saying that inflation has, I thought I could buy the beam for $100. It now costs $200. I want to charge you $200. Do you have the legal authority to pay $200? No. No. They got to eat it or they got to walk away from the contract. And hopefully you have done your contract well with a good lawyer and you have liquidated damages in your contract, something that will give you some reimbursements and you start your process again. I know that's hard. I know it is. But some of this has a reason, because a lot of people, not some of it, a lot of it has reason. A lot of people can come in and say something costs more. And you say, well, I'm sorry, but, you know, it costs me more to hire the people in my government too. But we all have to live with it.
I got a question. What if there's language in the contract that specify materials and supplies, if they go up, then the contract would go up?
Yes. You can, the question is, if there's language in the contract that allows the materials and supplies to go up, can you that's called an escalation clause. It should be reasonable, and if you have an escalation clause in the contract, they can go up to that reasonable escalation clause limit. But if you have an escalation clause in your contract, I want to caution you, your escalation clause has to be done in the light of the total amount you have to spend on that project. So it's a balancing act. Did you have another question, Andre?
Yes, ma'am. Can you share your thoughts on CMAR, please?
I don't know what CMAR is. Oh, that special provision in the law, the construction management, that has to be approved by the legislature. Is that what? I don't know.
It just says CMAR.
I'm going to just say that person has to call me.
Okay.
Okay?
And then one more.
Okay.
Is the electronic bidding website mentioned in the materials that they received?
Yes. Yes. And we reference it, but the question is the electronic bidding procedure mentioned in the materials you have? We reference it, but we go into it in some detail in our FAQs, which are on the auditor's website. All right? Now, it's 11:15. Do you want me to give you, we go till 12:10, I think, right? 12:10. Do y'all want a little break, or you want me to keep going and end sooner?
Keep going.
Keep going. All right. Food's more important. I know that. I understand. Public Works, some of it, you know, I can go through because I know you already know. I put this stuff, and I'm not going to go into detail on this, but I put this stuff in here about official journal, just so y'all would have the reference, because so many people are losing their newspapers in their communities. And, you know, like, if you don't have it, this gives you the criteria for how you go to the next newspaper. So, like, I think we were in, I can't remember, I think we were in Ruston a year or so ago, and they told me that the daily newspaper there had stopped. So they had to go to the parish of Washita to get it. So, is that me? Can I keep going? Keep going. All right. Oh, this thing is updating the computer, huh? That's right. All right, so anyway, I just wanted you to make sure that you knew how to do that in case there's a problem. This is probably not going to let me advance. It's not. Okay. Let me just...
We have a couple more questions.
Question?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Shea, what software or resource is used to place an electronic bid to an organization's website, and is this something provided by the state?
Says what software do they need to do electronic bidding? Is that the question?
Yes.
That I don't know. They have to. You can buy some. There are some companies out there that'll help you with that, and some software that will help you with that. And it's not provided by the state. Okay, that's your alternatives. If you have any issues on that, on the official journal, let me know and we'll talk about it more individually. So you should have it on the official journal, but you also advertise on your website. But it's not an or. You have to do both. Now, we've talked about these alternative procurement methods already. You can purchase it from another public entity who has it, or off-state contract, RFP, and then there's the piggyback stuff. Okay? If you're purchasing something from another public entity, document it. Document it. Can be a letter, can be a cooperative endeavor agreement, but something that documents it. The federal part, I'll put that there because if you're using federal funds, even if the amount is under our public bid, you're going to have to show some competitive bidding so that you can get the federal reimbursement. That's in the Code of Federal Regulations. So don't let that scoop down on you and cause you a problem. If you have some problems with that, you give us a call and we'll walk you through that individually. But generally, if you're using federal dollars, there has to be competitive bidding, even if it costs $20,000. So here's splitting, estimating. The last one on there I hadn't talked about, sole source. Sole source in Louisiana law is only mentioned in the state procurement code, which doesn't ordinarily apply to you except if you adopt it. It applies to state agencies. But here's what people do. Personally, I always thought I could be a lawyer or a salesman. So I always sold the most yearbooks, and I just like talking to people, and they bought stuff from me. So I'm not putting salesmen down. But salesmen have a way of saying, that is the only sound system that will work. Only one. We're the only one on the planet who make that sound system. Now I'm going to tell you, and you know it, you can Google and find almost anything, right? You can go on Amazon and somebody in the deepest jungle in Brazil or in China can make that. Sole source is almost non-existent today because of the planet. So don't let someone tell you that you can only do this. Now, they may be that they're the distributor and that's all they carry. That's a problem. But it's not your public bid problem for sole source. On splitting, the first one up there, just don't be artificial. If something costs $50,000, it costs $50,000. Don't buy it in 5 segments so you don't have to bid it. That's what it is. Public Works, I give you some numbers there. I like the one about the 72 hours, and I like it. I put it out there. You can't change the rules midstream. That's all. The horse races started, cows out the barn. You can change it, but you can't change it midstream. And if you do, you got to give people time to adjust. What I do in almost every significant public bid situation that I do for the auditor's office, like bank contracts or major other contracts. I say we should have a mandatory bid conference. So if you don't come to that bid conference, I don't have to keep communicating with you. If you come to that mandatory bid conference, that tells me you're in the game with me. And you're going to keep, and I'm going to know that I have to keep communicating with you. And I'll keep telling you what other people are asking as questions and what you need to know. All right, talked about that. Any questions on that? I'm sorry. Good.
How do you know, how do you know how much to charge for liquidated damages per day?
I don't. How do you know how much to charge for liquidated damages per day? Well, I guess what I would do is I would see what's it going to cost my government if this project stops midstream. How many people are not going to have a place to sit because that office is not built? That's what I would do, and figure out back into a number. I would also talk to people who probably are smarter than me. How long will it take me to get this thing back up and running? So you would have them pay. I don't know what that was, but that was somebody didn't like liquidated damages, I think. I don't know. But let me give you a real life example of that. How many of y'all have been to downtown Baton Rouge lately? Okay. Then have you seen the new library that's down there? It's kind of like by the courthouse on St. Louis. It's really pretty. But one Sunday when they were building it, it started to drop. They didn't construct it right, and it was leaning. The front was leaning. They had to stop everything. They had to walk, just stop everything for, I think, almost a year. And you know what they're fighting about now? They've since completed the library. It's a lovely building. You know what they're fighting about? It had like these exposed columns that were holding up the portico. You know what they're fighting about now? Whose fault was it, and what are the liquidated damages? So it's kind of like, think about that before you do your contract. One of the most important things, I said it at the beginning, say it as we're getting to the end, is the construction of the contract. Now, I'm not against full employment for lawyers, but neither do I think lawyers are the end-all and be-all, me included. But construction of that contract so that you know what happens if something goes wrong is very important, extremely important. Liquidated damages, responsible parties, and so forth. Yes, ma'am.
Backing up to the electronic bid.
Yes, ma'am.
Doesn't the state or somebody have a place called central auction?
What she's asking is electronic bids the same as the state central purchasing thing. That, what you might be thinking of, is where the state goes to sell surplus property. That's different.
No. There used to be something,
Central bidding is private.
Statute, it's called central auction house.
Central bidding is a private company. It's out of Baton Rouge, just private.
It's a private company, but anytime your office maintains a website, I think, you have to send them all the information to put on their site also.
There are some, but yeah, that's different though. That's just, what I'm talking about is you're informing them of what you have on your website. But what I'm talking about is you say, I want to buy 50 reams of paper. That's on your website. It's unique to the assessor's office. And people start bidding on it. That's different. But if you find that other reference, let me look at it and we'll talk. Because I'm not familiar with that. Yes, ma'am?
How do you determine the difference between materials and
project, so you're buying physical cameras, for example, but they have to go into the walls and through two wires. How do you determine?
The question is, how do you determine the difference between materials and supplies and public works when you're purchasing IT equipment, right? That's the question.
And the project includes the installation of that.
And the installation. Material, you're purchasing the IT equipment, you're installing it. Is it a public works or is it a particular materials and supplies? I think the Attorney General opinions are right on this. You look at what is the most specific characteristic of that contract. Am I buying a camera, or am I buying a camera and software and there's a significant installation? Then I have to do it, I have to think about what's the overriding thing. Is it overriding construction, or is it overriding professional services, or is it overriding materials and supplies? So I can't give an answer without fact specific, but the consideration is, your question is excellent, has to be there. And whatever decision you make, I would document why you made that decision. And if you document why you made that decision, I think when Tiffany Dorsa and Diane and other people come in and look at it, you're going to be fine. Because if they happen to come and ask the lawyer, I'm going to say, that's the way I told them to do it. That might not get you, that 25 cents might not get you a cup of coffee, but you know I'll be there. So, okay, any other questions right now? Okay. Change orders, we've talked about that. The main deal here now is written. That little guy is working hard. Has to be within the scope of the contract. The recordation is in the clerk's office in your parish, in wherever the contracting project is. Here's just, if you go to any slide and you just say, hey, this is, again, I like summaries. I like big words. That's how I learn. So here's the main stuff that I've talked about today. All right, I want to, emergency and extreme emergency I've talked about. Here's the part that gets abused. When people want to keep the emergency going because it was just so much easier. It's got to stop. At some point, just remember, the sun will shine. You say, I had a contract for them to do X in my parish because we had to have it. They had to put the tarps on the roof. But now we're ready to put the roofs on the permanent. Am I going to bid that? Yes. Yes. The emergency, the extreme emergency has stopped. And we're in a period of normalcy, at least for a little while. Here's all the definitions that you might need. And here's a really good AG opinion that summarizes. And this gives me a chance to tell you this. We are not the Attorney General. Every advice that I give is from the perspective of you as government and what the auditor and under the audit law it will be looking for, which is for transparency, accountability, compliance with the law. I'm not as lucky as Tiffany. I've seen a lot of fraud and abuse. And I want to keep you from being in that arena. And so my advice is from the auditor's perspective. I base my advice, and so do the lawyers who work with me, on court cases, on Attorney General opinions, and interpretation of statutes that we have tested with groups like the Louisiana Municipal Association. So I don't want you to think the auditor is replacing the Attorney General. We stand hand in hand. There is a woman at the Attorney General's office who's the head of the Civil Division, Angelique Friel. I refer people to Angelique all the time. She's an excellent lawyer, and we talk. But it's their job to put together opinions. Now, you haven't asked me this question, but I get this question a couple of times a month. They'll say, I understand. Can you give me that in writing? And I say no. Why? Because I don't want to be in competition with the Attorney General. But what we do is we give you those FAQs, we give you those white papers that are based upon Attorney General opinions in court cases. And, you know, I'm not looking for more work, but we love giving presentations like this. We love talking to you about your particular circumstance, your particular issues. Or you could come over to our office. We got big conference rooms, and talk to us. Whatever helps you to better use that public dollar. That's what you heard Mr. Wagersbach say, and he follows, you know, a good tradition of auditors. We're not into I gotcha. So here are some AG opinions. And then I just want to spend just a few minutes on Cabela. And Cabela was a case that came about because they wanted to build that Cabela Sporting Good and Bass Pro in Ascension, Cabela, Bass Pro in Livingston. And they wanted to use tax monies so that they could build those buildings and establish those stores. And it had never come to the Supreme Court where somebody had said, if you will, let us not pay school taxes, not pay some sales taxes. We will do economic development in your area. We always had this concept in the law of tax increment financing, but this was it on a giant scale. And people objected, as you can well imagine. They went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court at that point changed the interpretation of what public money could be used for when there was a promise of something more occurring. That's Cabela. It has to be for a public purpose. It can't be a gift, and you have to expect something back. Now, it's not quid pro quo. It's not we give Cabela $1, we give Bass Pro $1, and they give us back $2. It's not that. But it talks about, the court does, of some expectation. And the Attorney General, since 2006, has continued to interpret that. And so, a lot of times, you are, and I am, asked about cooperative endeavor agreements, which are permitted under the Supreme Court case, as long as those elements are there. We have placed on our website some templates for cooperative endeavor agreements. They are contracts. There are contracts that say, if you want to come in here and you want to do this, and you want me to give you public dollars for that, I got to make sure it's not just to benefit me, and that something else is going to happen good for this community. That's Cabela. And we got there in the materials all of the things you might need to look at, and we can talk. It does not become a Cabela agreement just because you write cooperative endeavor agreement at the top of the page. That won't do it. You got to go through the reasoning and the process and show what you're going to get. What you're giving, what you're going to get. Example of the negative. I personally think one of the best things in America is St. Jude's Hospital. I think it's wonderful. I've known so many people who have benefited from St. Jude's Hospital. Can the auditor give a part of his budget to St. Jude's Hospital? Answer, no. It's not part of the public purpose of the auditor. So he can't do that. Is it a good cause? Absolutely. Is he going to personally benefit? No. But it's not part of his public purpose, so he can't get through the first prong of that. So that's kind of where it goes. Whereas if you say, here's a positive, if you say, in our town, we are promoting youth sports because we're very concerned about gang violence and children on the streets and things like that. So they have a group that's doing youth sports, and they have a town or a parish, and they're going to work together so that there is a better outcome in this community. With some work, that could be a cooperative endeavor. Yes?
In a general obligation bond sale, what is the date of appropriation, the date of the sale, or the date funds are received? And it was followed up by the bond sale is to fund HVAC systems.
Yep. I think you have to have the money before you go to the bond. Let me answer the question. In a bond sale, when do you have to have the money if you're going to go out for bonds? That's the question. You have to have the money appropriated before you go out for the bonds. Or you have to have, well, I'll say this. Yeah, you would if you wouldn't go out for bonds if you had the money. You have to have the plan before you go out for bonds. And that's a question that would have to be presented to the State Bond Commission. You concur on that, Diane? That's more of an accounting auditing issue. Kind of. Any other questions? Now, I know they tell you in court you should never do this, but I'm gonna do this here because I think y'all are okay. Is there anything else you want to ask me? I'm gonna be here tomorrow to talk about some changes in the law, but is there anything I haven't covered on public bid? Yes, ma'am.
I was curious, why is there a different amount for latest vehicle?
I don't know. See, the question was, why is there a different amount for police vehicles? Well, I say I don't know. Years ago, they gave the police a little bit of a benefit. So the public bid amount was more, and they let them go under the public bid. They let them go, the public bid amount was more, but they let them go, the police vehicle cost less. They didn't make them bid it. I think I said that wrong. They didn't make them bid it. Now it's not a benefit. They should have really changed the police vehicle to 60 the way they changed it to 60 in the regular public bid law. And some people say that there are some legislators that are going to do that. And Mr. Wagasback, he was a sheriff, and I think he's getting some people saying to him, let's try to get this right. That's a very good question. Yes, ma'am?
When you say police versus others, sheriff's office, are you referring to all utility purchase? Still make
the police vehicle is really the one. The question is, are we talking about all vehicles that law enforcement would purchase, or only those special vehicles that are used for law enforcement? We're only talking about the special vehicles that are used for law enforcement, the ones that you all would use for other things like your maintenance and transporting prisoners and so forth would be under the regular public bid law. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about RFP process selection committee. Would you consider...
I can't hardly hear you. RFP?
Yes, about selection committee.
Yeah.
Would you consider the selection committee having to phrase what I want to say. Do they have to follow open meetings law?
Yeah, I heard it. Does the RFP committee have to follow the open meetings law?
The selection committee, yes.
The selection committee. I do not think they have to follow the open meetings law unless the selection committee happens to be the Board of Aldermen. If it's just part of your ordinary process, no, because open meetings has to be people who have been elected or appointed to carry on the business of the agency. That's a great question. Thank you for that. Yes, sir?
If a building's roof was damaged by a hurricane, are the repairs considered public works or routine maintenance to repair?
If the building's roof was damaged by a hurricane, is it a public work or a maintenance? Well, in my case in Terrebonne Parish, that was a public work because it just ripped the whole roof off. If it's a shingle or two, might say maintenance, but it depends upon the scope of the project.
That's right, and the extent of the damage as far as FEMA reimbursement goes.
That's correct. And even if it was maintenance, I'll go back to what I said, if you were using FEMA money or other federal money, you're going to have to get some kind of competitive bid. Any other questions? But then, you know, like I stopped before 11:45, so I expect that's going to reflect on my evaluation. Thank you. It's not Cabela. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenifer, for that. We will break for lunch, and we will start back at 1:10.